Okay, so we got the 2017 Fat Bob. And the 2018 Fat Bob. Now, of course, you know that they've changed the frames. The 2018 is now a soft tail. 2017 is still the Dyna frame. Styling cues are still the same. This is the stock 103. That one's going to be a stock 114. I'm going to be test riding both today to kind of give you a side-by-side comparison. Some of the things I noticed right off the bat. Shapes of the saddle are similar. This one seems to be a little more forgiving on the vinyl. Of course, you know that some of the soft tails now have the adjustment for the rear suspension there, whereas the Dynas are on both sides. It still has the factory sticker down there. Pegs have changed. Still a little informal. Let's go with the center of the peg here. One Anthony finger. It looks like the old style peg. There's a lip here.
Okay, so on this ride, I ran into a little difficulty with the primary camera, the one that's mounted to my helmet. What ended up happening is that the mic came unplugged, so in order to make the footage I took usable, I'm going to start off with the 2017 Fat Bob based on the Dyna frame. Some of the issues that I experienced I'm going to cover in detail, and hopefully you'll enjoy the footage. I believe it's going to demonstrate some of the points just a little bit better than the primary camera would have captured anyway. So one of the first things that I experienced with the bike is the placement of the kickstand. On the left side of the bike, the kickstand has a tab that actually is barely noticeable behind the clutch cover. So you kind of have to reach behind you with your foot to deploy the kickstand. So I went over that a few times just to see how comfortable it was. It was very awkward, not very user friendly. So at this point, once I'm rolling along, I had my feet up on the forward controls. It's been a while since I've ridden a bike with forward controls. On this particular bike, the way it's set up, the stock forward controls on the Dyna frame really extends your leg. I have an inseam of approximately 34 inches, and I felt like it was a bit of a stretch. As I was riding, I later on tried it to see how flickable the bike is. You really don't get to offer a lot of input based off your feet because they are so forward that pushing down with either your left or right foot really doesn't affect the frame. It doesn't have any input on the frame that you would think. So as far as canyon carving goes, it's not very helpful. It was along here where I was riding the bike and I was noticing that there was a bit of a vibration, high frequency vibration coming through the pegs and through the hand grips. It was really annoying. It seemed to pop up around 2,000 to 2,600 RPM. The reason why I say it's annoying is because if you are on a long trip, I easily see that vibration after a while is going to cause some sensation issues in your hands and feet. Part of that reason is that the Dyna frame, the twin cam motor in the Dyna frame, is not counterbalanced. It's rubber mounted, so the company didn't look into dampening the vibration beyond what the rubber mounts offer. The only problem is with a rubber mounted powertrain, since the swing arm is tied to the transmission bolted to the motor, and all that's rubber mounted. If you were going through twisties, you could experience a little bit of leveraging on that swing arm, causing the powertrain to come in and out of alignment. There are some companies out there such as True Track and some others that are aftermarket that offer ways of tightening up the mounts, add-on pieces to tighten up the mounting of the powertrain, but I don't think it offers anything as far as deadening this high frequency vibration that you would get, which is very unfortunate because some of this footage you'll see that I go over some bumps and potholes, and the bike does really well as far as the suspension goes. So let's talk about maneuverability. Both of these bikes have drag bars with risers. It does not make for a very tight turning bike because the drag bars, even with my long reach, they don't give me enough play as far as maneuverability goes to really tighten up the turn in a U-turn. If I were to buy either one of these bikes, one of the things I would look at would be changing out the bars to something a little bit more comfortable. Definitely a lot more practical for going through curves and through turns. Drag bars, they were designed for, like the name comes from, they were designed for drag racing. They weren't designed for parking lot tight maneuvers and things of that nature. It's just something you may want to consider when looking at either of these bikes. What I want you to do is look and notice how the image vibrates. This is just with the bike at idle. That's the kind of vibration that I was feeling in my feet and hands while rolling along that I was describing earlier. So, that's something to consider. So I shut the bike down just to kind of give the camera a chance to stabilize. Okay, so I start the bike back up here in a second. And you'll see the camera start shaking again. That's the frequency that you'll feel in your hands and feet. Maybe it was just this bike, but this bike's pretty much all stock. Little view there of the lean angle going through a tight U-turn. I will say that the brakes on both the bikes were marvelous. The floating rotors on the front of the bikes really makes it a lot easier to stop the bike, and really confident. you can see I'm taking measurements at different parts of the exhaust system. You see it range from about 139, kind of goes up a little bit, the hottest point.
Okay, so this is the 2018 Fat Bob. Like I said, it's on a soft tail frame. Adjustable suspension. I can see that they need to have an indicator on this knob. If they have an indicator on the knob, even though you got an audible clip. It's so nice.
So as I was explaining, the indicator knob, or the knob for adjustment, needs a hash mark on it so you can tell when you get a full and a half turn. There were no hash marks between the numbers, which makes setting the suspension just a slight bit vague. I check out the Jiffy Stand here. It locks when there's pressure put on it. There's no pressure. Now I put pressure on it, won't fold up. Let it go. It folds up fine. It's not as far of a swing as with the previous style, and the tab's a lot easier to find. So let's get this thing fired up and see how it works. One of the first things I noticed, the difference between the frames, is that my legs aren't as stretched as far out in front of me. They're still sort of forward controls, but they're a lot more comfortable. My knees aren't stretched out straight. I can actually steer the bike with pressure on my feet as I'm going down the road if I choose to. The handlebars are still drag bars, so same applies as the 2017 as far as drag bars go. Could use a little higher risers on the bike, but overall the feel of the bike feels a little bit more nimble than the previous Dyna frame that they had for this model. Cornering on the bike is a lot easier than the Dyna frame, again because you do have the ability to give input pushing down on either the right or left peg, whereas before you were having to use your hips more so, and that makes it a lot easier. The suspension on the bike is pretty comfortable. I could have used it to be just a tad more soft. I'm getting a high frequency vibration out of the end of the handlebars, but it's only like 5% of what it was on the Dyna. Maybe some different grips would help that out. The vibration in the foot pegs, near non-existent. Now the advantage you have over a softail on the softail frame is that the engine and transmission are solid or rigid mounted to the frame. There may be, rubber grommets or something involved, but it's not like a Dyna where there's actual rubber mounts. So you're not going to get that play in the powertrain if you start going through the twisties or a lot of switchbacks that you would get on a Dyna frame bike. Again, the suspension, it's comparable. Probably could have been set a little bit softer to make it a little bit more comfortable. But overall, the fit of the bike is really nice. I would have appreciated it having a 5-gallon instead of 3.5-gallon tank. Changing the bars out would be helpful. Like I said, adding a riser is nice. The sight line, since the LED light is so short, your sight line kind of ends right there at the bars. That may or may not be unnerving to you. It depends on the type of rider you are. If you're used to seeing a headlight out in front of you, this may throw you off just slightly. Now here in a second I'm going to demonstrate using my feet to steer the bike by pressing up or down, pressing down on either the left or right foot peg. here I go finding some more manhole covers, things of that nature to go over to check the suspension. It's comparable as far as the amount of jolting you get as compared to the Dyna frame Fat Bob. Again, I probably could have set the suspension just a little bit softer, and since there's no tool required, it makes it a lot easier to adjust. The foot pegs, even though they seem small, actually are comfortable, very comfortable in fact. I didn't feel like my feet were about to come off. It doesn't look like they're about to come off from the rear view camera. The brakes work very well. Again, you have dual floating disc brakes on the front, which are rotors on the front, which is very helpful. Gives you a lot of confidence when stopping. Yes, I noticed the odd lope of the bike at idle, as well as the different sound of the intake as the Milwaukee 8 idled nicely. To me, it wasn't bothersome, and if you notice, there's no major vibration while I was sitting there, so that, you know, it's very helpful. Even with the short test ride that the dealership allowed me to do on both bikes, I still wanted to get the engine heat. Here you see it's about, what, 211, 208, maybe up to 213. Down there it's 231, which is kind of odd. 247, 289 to 302 through the heat shield right there. It's like, what is that all about? So I go behind the heat shield to try to see what the issue might be. It appears that the catalytic converter is right in this section right here. I guess the catalytic converter stores up some heat. I mean, it has to have a certain temperature for the chemical processes to take place as the exhaust goes through it. But that's not very helpful as far as rides go. You know, my touring bike is running, you know, a little over 400 right in that same spot. So you may be asking yourself, alright, so which one's the winner? And in my opinion, the clear winner is going to be the 2018 Fat Bob Softail. The frame is so much more solid feel to it. The adjustability of suspension, lack of the vibration, those things are pluses. The minuses are you have a 3.5 gallon tank instead of 5 gallon tank. Both of them have a minus of the drag bars, so that kind of equals out. All things being equal, if you walked into the dealership today and wanted to buy a Fat Bob, I would go for the 2018 Fat Bob